Good morning, everyone. So we'll start the session now. And just to introduce myself, I'm Ram, and I manage the partnerships and strategic alliances for the Indian School of Public Policy. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining. Looks like there's a lot of interest for the webinar. Really appreciate that. And today, as you all know, we have Ms. Vinita Hariharan as speaker for this session, who is a part of government relations and public policy team at World Bank. So just to give a brief about her profile, she is a public policy expert with over 2 decades of experience in leadership roles, also formulated and led key flagship policies and programs at the national level in various themes such as urban, rural, and livelihoods domain. Ms. Vinita, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much for joining. So without any further delay, but before I hand over the session, I would like to just inform you all that there is a chat box available on the right side of your screen as you all look at, and all attendees will be in the listen mode so that there won't be any interruptions during the session while speaker is talking. So any questions you have, you can keep dropping them. The speaker will answer only during the Q&A session, which will be after half an hour. Once the session begins. So without any delay, I would like to hand over the session to Ms. Vinita. Over to you. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. And am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, and good morning to all of you. I would like to thank Indian School of Public Policy. First of all, I think congratulate them for having started this course on public policy in India. Of course, we do have institutes which are offering these courses here, but not really, a course specifically designed for public policy. Am I right, Ram? This is the first time in India that we are starting this kind of a policy course.
That's correct. That's correct, Vinita.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah. So I think we'll have to congratulate the board and the very eminent people on the board in the school. Just to give a background about myself and how I came up with this course in public policy and how I've become a public policy professional, so to speak. I'm basically a civil engineer, and I did my engineering from Kerala. And after which I always wanted to go from micro to macro, always graduate from the micro level to a macro level. So every step in my career has been determined by this urge to actually move from, small to big canvases. And so from the engineering, I graduated to do a master's in urban planning from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. And at that point of time, that was the only school and only course in India which was giving a macro level picture, which is not really the masters in public in business administration, the MBA, which everybody was queuing up for. So this was the only course with a difference, and which was giving a policy overview in the development field. So that is when I did this masters in urban planning. In the masters in urban planning, they also cover a lot of strategy, a lot of policy, etc. So after this master's in urban planning, I worked for an advisory firm for a couple of years, and then I went on to work with a development funding institution called HUTCO, Housing and Urban Development Corporation. So all through my career, around 10, 12 years, I was actually doing I was actually anchoring various public projects and also disbursing grants and monitoring the utilization of these grants. So it was a tremendous exposure to public projects and programs. But somehow I always felt handicapped and rather limited in my domain as an urban planner or as a technocrat, so to speak. I always felt insubordinated to policy, put to public administrators. And I also thought that I was not really being able to influence change, so to speak, which was always my philosophy, to be the change that you want to see. So that's when I decided that perhaps a course in public administration or public policy would actually enhance my worldview and I would be able to come out with solutions that a lot of issues that were plaguing India at that point of time, infrastructure issues, policy issues. So a lot of these issues I felt had a root to perhaps faulty public policies. So that's when I came across this course in public policy from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore. And I decided to also look beyond our country and see how other developing nations are grappling with these issues. And I consciously chose not to do it from any Ivy League institution, because Occidental trainings don't really give you solutions for the kind of brownfield issues that we have in developing countries such as ours. So that's when I decided to do this course in public administration and policy, and it was an absolute game changer for me. An absolute paradigm shift in the way I looked at issues, the way I perceived problems, the way I perceived the way I came out with development solutions for various issues. And what I realized, that solutions are very, very simple. It's just about how we how we go about it, what is the methodology. So that was what I learned in the school, and we had a cohort of around 80 professionals from across various disciplines. Basically, they were policy administrators, professionals, technocrats, bureaucrats from across the world, of course. But the important thing was they were from various domains, so we could interact and we could exchange views and thoughts and case studies, best practices from across the world, across the various countries in Southeast Asia. So that that gave me a lot of exposure into how we could actually come out with policy solutions which are very simple. They're out there, they're prevalent, but we're not trained. Our mind or our thought process is not really trained to look at these solutions, which actually comes about with through a variety of applications, like variety of techniques, which are again everyday knowledge, but we don't apply it unless we are trained to do so. Which I'll take you through those, key steps which I've evolved out of my experiences of evolving policies for various entities. I've just come out with simple steps as to how to, formulate a policy and how to come out with solutions. So after my mid-career program, which was a game changer, so to speak, in public policy, I was lucky enough, or rather, perhaps because of this training, I got this opportunities and very, very interesting assignments with various ministries. Began with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, where I was it was funded by DFID. It was a program which was it was a memorandum of understanding between the MOU between the Ministry of Housing and the DFID, which is the UK funding arm. You all must be aware. Through this, we were actually trying. There was a policy called the Support to National Policy for Urban Poverty Reduction. So I was actually tasked with formulating a policy for addressing the housing shortage for the country. And so we worked with very senior bureaucrats, ministers, and various other experts and policymakers in the country, and came out with a very sustainable and very, very interesting policy for addressing the housing shortage, which I'll take you through the course of this lecture. The other, just after that, because there was the government change in 2014, so I had to take a cooling off period. So I worked for a brief while, for a year, with CRISIL, which is the urban advisory. They have an urban advisory wing, the Standard and Poor Company. But there also I had a very interesting assignment wherein I got to design a credit line for almost 100 million euros for the AFD, which is Agency Française de Développement, is a French funding agency. And this credit line was routed through the National Housing Bank. And this was for promoting green affordable housing in the country. And this is now actually launched. It's called SunRef, and NHB is actually implementing this and giving out funds through this credit line. That was an interesting experience working with the private sector, but at the same time also engaging with the public sector and coming out with a policy, or coming out with actually an implementable credit line for affordable housing again. So then after that, I moved on to the Ministry of Rural Development, where I got an opportunity to head a team from the World Bank. And we were asked to come on board because the Ministry of Rural Development was at that point of time grappling with the policy, which was not a program which actually did not work on the ground, called the provision of urban amenities in rural areas, called PURA, which was the vision of Abdul Kalam, where he wanted to provide urban amenities in rural areas. But the way it was designed, the methodology was slightly faulty. So I was asked to come on board to come out with a new methodology for selection of clusters, which was actually this was a command by the Prime Minister himself to actually come out with a new methodology for selection of clusters, where he thought the state governments also had to be involved in this selection process, and it all came out from the philosophy of cooperative federalism, which this government was practicing, as you all are aware. So I came on board, and then we designed an entirely new methodology for selection of clusters, which was combining spatial as well as statistical tools. And it was a very interesting methodology that we came out with, thanks to my wonderful team that I had and with me. We worked for 3 months, extremely dedicated effort for 3 months, and we came out with a very interesting methodology for selection of clusters. And then, because of this, the Prime Minister was so impressed and happy with this methodology and this policy, that he wanted this team to come on board, and he wanted us to come on board and implement this for the Ministry of Rural Development. And so I came on board, and then I implemented this program for 3 long years, which meant actually playing the role of a public administrator. So I was actually living up to the the course that I did in public policy and administration, and rolling out this program across the country, which meant interacting with various stakeholders, moving out to the state governments, and disseminating this policy and this program. And also then it got it to the point of where I had to actually monitor the utilization of the funds by the various state governments. So it's been an interesting journey, and now I'm currently with the World Bank again and working on a new program for micro enterprises, for the development of micro enterprises in the unorganized sector across the country. We are coming out with a gamut of solutions from end to end. So this is my journey till so far. Why I narrated this entire journey was that to give you a flavor of what exactly a policymaker does, and what is the career journey, so to speak, a career path of a typical public policy or a public administrator who's qualified and trained in public policy. So to come to the core of the topic today, which is the key steps in policy formulation. Now, if, for example, if any of you do this course in the policy course, which is offered by the Indian School, and you land up with a job with the World Bank or with DFID or with any funding, multilateral funding, or directly with the ministry or with the government of India, and you're tasked with formulating a new policy. Now, if I were to take you through the example of what I formulated at the Ministry of Housing. Now, the very first step that you need to do while formulating a policy is to diagnose the problem. Now, unless there's a problem, you don't really need to do a policy, right? A policy is evolved because there is a problem out there. And the problem is not simple. It's a development issue. It's a problem that affects so many millions of stakeholders. So it's not easy to actually diagnose the crux of the problem. Now, the key is to diagnose the core of the problem so that you come out with solutions that address all dimensions of the problem. So the problem statement has to be articulated very well. It has to be succinct, but at the same time, it has to come out with a very, very good research in the background. So when you look at housing ministry now, if they ask you to formulate a policy for providing housing for all for 2022, so what is exactly the problem statement, and what is the problem there, in housing, provision of housing for all? Why is the government, or why doesn't everybody in this country have a roof over their head? It's as simple as that. No, so the diagnosing a problem is also not so easy. It's one of the biggest chunk of a policy formulation exercise, because once you get that right, you get your solutions right, you get your root causes right, everything comes, flows out from that. So for diagnosing the problem, we did a lot of stakeholder consultations with experts, with administrators, with the bureaucrats, the ministers. So then we understood a big revelation was that housing shortage doesn't really lie in providing more houses or constructing houses, more and more houses, because there's actually a glut in the market for the middle income group and the upper income group, so to speak. So the actual crisis lay in provision of housing for the economically weaker section of the lower income group. And even then, it was not about creating more stock, it was about upgrading the existing units that they are living in. So the problem was actually about slum dwellers. So we identified there were around 100 million slum dwellers at that point of time. And even today, the figure is around that much 100 million slum dwellers. We needed to uplift them from their existing housing conditions and bring them at par with the housing stock of rest of the country. So the problem statement was actually providing housing for 100 million slum dwellers. It's as simple as that, but as deep and as real as that. So what's the next step? Once you identify the problem, the next step is to identify the root cause of the problem. So the causes could be many. Now, why are there slums in the country? Of course, it's to do with distress migration. It's to do with urban livelihoods. So sometimes the causes, the solutions may not lie in the organizations which employ you to formulate a policy. For example, Ministry of Housing. Uh, the unit in which I was working was not actually in charge of livelihoods. So what we did was the root cause, which is urban livelihoods, the reason for the distress migration. We allocated this part of the policy making exercise to the urban livelihoods team. So we need to identify the causes and then align the concerned department that deals with these causes as well. Now, the cause that we could deal with, the Ministry of Housing, the core department of the Ministry of Housing could deal with, is to ameliorate the conditions of the slum dwellers. And how do you actually provide better housing stock for the slum dwellers? So for this, then we sat with experts again. So stakeholder consultations. Now, that's a very, very important exercise in policy formulation, because without stakeholders, that's something that again I learned from the school, which is like a 360-degree feedback from all stakeholders is very, very essential. The social capital that you build from your entire career in a public policy field is extremely important. It's underestimated, because as technical persons, or if you've already studied certain technical subjects, you actually don't realize the importance of stakeholder consultations. Now, that's the key to public policy, if I were to say. Identify stakeholder consultation is extremely essential, and how we go about doing stakeholder consultation. There's a science to that as well, because you have to first identify whom you need to call, first identify the stakeholders at various levels, which are impacted by this problem. So if it's housing issue, who are the stakeholders, at various level, starting from the grassroots level, the block level, to the district level, to the state level, to the national level. You identify the stakeholders, perhaps the panchayat, the representatives at the gram panchayat level, at the block level, the block development officers, then at the city level, the urban local bodies, the municipal commissioners, or the councillors, they are the stakeholders at the city level. If you come to the national level, then of course the housing boards, the housing development corporations, the funding institutions, these are all the stakeholders. So we need to bring them all together in one umbrella, perhaps not at one time, but you have series of stakeholder consultations at various stages, at various levels. And then you identify, it's very simple, it's just like a reporting exercise where you go in as a journalist perhaps, and then identify the issues that are brought out by these various stakeholders at various levels. And then you adopt your policy lens and then look at these issues and try to see, and then you sit with the experts, and then you identify, you come out with a holistic solution to the gamut of issues that were identified across various stakeholder consultation levels. So after doing all this exercise, we came out with a very simple 9-step process for slum upgradation, or slum-free city plan, so to speak. So the 9-step was going through a gamut of activities, like conducting slum surveys, mapping the slums, understanding the land tenure of slums, whether they could be retained in the same land or not, whether they need to be rehabilitated, do they need to be, if they have to be rehabilitated, what about the land? How do we identify land, within the city or outside the city. Again, if you displace them from their core areas, their livelihoods gets impacted. So how do you then work around that? So upgradation, slum upgradation was identified as a program of choice. This was after a wide range of consultations. We understood that they needed to be upgraded in situ wherever they are. So for slum upgradation, again, we came out with a 9-step process of how we could make cities slum free. So I won't get into technicalities of that because that has a lot to do with housing and urban planning, etc. But I just took this as an example, but you really need not be an urban planner, so to speak, to come out with a policy solution for housing shortage in the country. You could always, consult experts in the field and then use your policy lens to come out with a policy solution. So what I'm trying to say is public policy is actually sector agnostic. You could go beyond your sector. So that's what the public policy degree gives you. Now, suppose you are an engineer and you want to do a public policy course. This course actually gives you a wide perspective. It allows you to transit beyond your specialization and look at solutions for issues beyond your area or your domain expertise. Or it could also be if some people are very, they're very attached to their, or where they're engaged with their core profession and they don't want to digress from their core profession, they could use the public policy degree to come out with solutions for their own domain. For example, for me, this was because I was trained in housing and urban planning. So, and then a policy lens, it gave me the added advantage. But I didn't stick to urban planning or housing. Moved on to Ministry of Rural Development, where again I had to find solutions for a similar issue of migration. How do you prevent people from migrating from rural areas to urban areas? So again, I came out with a solution which is not really to do with urban planning or rural or housing, but with policy solutions for encouraging rural dwellers to remain in rural areas. And today I am with the World Bank, back to World Bank. We are doing micro enterprise solutions. So the journey is, you travel across domains, but find out solutions. And interestingly, you see that the methodology works for this kind of methodology, wherein you go from problem diagnosis to problem solutions. The journey is similar in all sectors, be it health, it could be skilling, it could be a solution for the petroleum crisis, or it could be a solution for anything, so to speak, but of course, if it's a highly specialized area, like if it's defense, then of course we need to be in close engagement with the experts, and we can't really get into their domain. So if you want to summarize the step-by-step process for policy formulation, first is of course problem diagnosis. You arrive at the problem statement, you find the root cause of the problem, align the root cause to the relevant stakeholders, conduct stakeholder consultations at all levels of the policy domain. Then you arrive at an easy to use step-by-step method to implement the policy solution, and work out, of course, long-term strategies to make the policy sustainable. Now, that's very important because a policy cannot be short-lived. You can't provide a policy that is just to last for the term of the government, so to speak, or 5 years. No, that's not a good policy solution. That's not a good program to come out with. Now, there are programs which run through various governments, like you have the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which was formulated in when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, and it has been going on now successfully. It's one of the best programs of Government of India. Then you have the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which has again traversed across governments. So those are really programs which run the test of time. So which means the policy formulation was very, very extensive, in-depth, and accurate. Now, coming to the subject of the scope of public policy, that maybe many of you would be waiting to know, what is the scope? What if I do a public policy? Where do I go and work? Where are the jobs? Where are the opportunities? Now, I would say the sky is the limit, because you can work with various agencies. You can cut across. Even you can also get into the domain of MBA person or management graduate. You go above all of them. So you could engage with ministries and departments directly in their program management unit. You could work as a policymaker there, or if some of you are very senior, you could head the program management units and actually get to don the robes of a public administrator, so to speak. And next option is, of course, multilateral and bilateral funding agencies like the World Bank and the DFID, the United Nations, UN Habitat, UNESCO, you name it. All of them, you have scope for public policy people. Then, of course, consulting firms. They are another, employers who would actually want public policy professionals on board, like the Ernst and Young, the Price Waterhoopers, etc. And then, of course, development funding corporations, they also would require public policy people. And those of you who who are not very interested in working with the public sector and with the government, because that has its own challenges. So if you're comfortable with the private sector, you could look at working with various large multinational corporations like Apple, Facebook, Amazon. All of them require public policy people at various levels. They need junior public policy people. They need people to head their public policy and strategy wings of various large multinational corporations. That's a very interesting role to play as well after post the public policy. And they also have government affairs wings in various large corporations, where they actually employ people to liaison with the government and also evolve policies that impact their sector, because telecommunications or whichever sector you name it, IT. They all need. WhatsApp is also looking for public policy people. Then, of course, those of you who are research, you have a research bent of mind and you would like to pursue hardcore research, pure research, then you could look at research institutions like the Center for Public Policy Research, CPR in Delhi, Brookings Institution. So there are various organizations that look for these qualified professionals. So we could say the sky is the limit again. It's sector agnostic strategy thinking in any organization at the highest level. That's your role, and of course it gives you a helicopter vision of various problems, and enables you to therefore fit into very senior levels in various organizations in the strategizing domain of these corporations. So so I think, Ram, I've covered the topic in its entirety. So should we then go forward to the questions?
Yes, actually, we can open it for questions. We have some questions
Yeah,
posted by the participants. Just
right. So one of them is saying I have been muted, and please
no, so
unmute.
we,
Okay, sorry.
yeah, there is one question actually. Do you think I'll just read out the question for you?
Yes,
Do you
I saw
think?
that. I think
Yeah, okay.
work experience is a requisite before pursuing. No, no, not really. Like I said, you could also be a very fresh graduate and you would like to do a master's in public policy. You don't really need to have prior work experience. Is the Indian school insisting for prior work experience, Ram?
Yeah, so we are actually not insisting on anything. We are just opening. We have just opened it. The kind of applications we have been receiving, we are seeing, experienced professionals are also showing interest and then applying for the program, which is quite interesting. We are quite open. There is no such insistence
Right.
as such.
There is scope for people who have already worked, because then if you're offering a mid-career program, then it really helps. But also, if you are offering a same course for both, young graduates as well as mid-career people, it helps because then you learn to exchange views and different experiences that you on different stages of life that you are all coming from. So that helps you to learn from your seniors, and seniors can also get some energy and enthusiasm from the junior people. So that's a good, interesting mix of cohort.
Yeah.
So someone's asking about the construction of houses away from the core areas and from the livelihood. Absolutely, absolute in agreement with you. That's why I said when we formulated the policy, it was slum upgradation as a program of choice, in situ upgradation, and not really locating them far away. You're right, there's a vacant housing stock is a big percentage of the housing that was constructed under JNNURM, which is again a policy failure, I would say. So every time a policy that you formulate, that's something that you need to get used to. You will not always be successful 100%. So you have to be very, very, you have to have a high tenacity when you are in this field, because many of your policies may not work for several reasons beyond your scope. You are not responsible for that. There are externalities which lead to these failures, but this is a policy failure wherein they decided to locate houses away from the core city area, which is not correct. You need to construct houses for the poor where they are living. Try to upgrade their housing stock in situ. That's the answer for that question. And so someone's asking about slum rehabilitation authority. Decentralization, yes. To a large extent, it has been decentralized, but of course, construction of houses, etc., still is it rests with the state government authorities, and it has not been decentralized onwards down below to the urban local bodies. But like India is struggling with a whole lot of capacity issues. So 20 years back when I did my policy or my urban planning, I was taught that, capacity building is the issue in India. And 20 years later, when I still work as a senior level in policy making, it's still the same issue. So we are somehow unable to develop capacities at the grassroots level. So if you suddenly ask a Gram Panchayat or an urban local body to start providing and constructing houses for their people, it's going to be a tall order. So we still have a long way to go in building capacities of our grassroots level institutions. So while urban local bodies, this is a answer to Manan Seth, if he's still there. So while you need to include urban local bodies as a part of your stakeholder matrix and consult with them and make them a part of maybe committees, but not really make them directly accountable for construction of housing. So what kind of salaries are expected post-course with 10 to 12 years of experience with corporates? Salary structures, I would say, may not be as good as the private sector. I mean, as good as a MBA graduate, but they're also sometimes as good. So nowadays, it's almost at par. So if you're heading a policy division, or if you're heading a program management unit, you get anywhere between 30 to 40 lakhs per annum, so which is good enough. So, and if it also depends on the number of years of experience. And now, if you're working with a multilateral, funding agencies, they are very fair and transparent in their salaries. They go by the number of years of experience. So, if you have 10 years, you have a certain salary bracket. If you have 15 years, it's certain. So it's very open and transparent. So salary is not an issue. It's not a constraint. It's not a low-paying job at all. Let me tell you that much. Yeah. What is the scope of public policy in civil services? Yes, if you're preparing for civil services and if you want to do this course and then go for the IAS, I'm sure this is going to be extremely beneficial for you, because it gives you a perspective on policy making, which is what administrators actually do today. Is public policy managing government affairs in large corporations like Walmart, Flipkart? Yes, like I said, WhatsApp, Facebook, all of them are looking for public policy experts on board. And public policy is a very, very important department in all these multinational corporations, because they all need to work in tandem with the government and in tandem with the policies that are emerging for that sector. So the policies that are formulated for that sector always influence the performance of corporations and their bottom line and top line. So therefore, a public policy person is extremely relevant for these corporations. So should we pursue a master's in public policy to make a career in the same? Is there any way we can get into a career in public policy without a master's? No, you can't get into a public policy without a master's. You can't you can't get a job without, you can't get a job in a management field without an MBA, right? So you need to do your master's in public policy, to be a public policy expert, because otherwise, what is the point in an education, right? So part-time courses, I don't know. I think ISPP will have to explain whether there are part-time courses being offered. Hello, hello.
Hello. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
here.
Ram. Are we looking at part-time courses in future?
In future, we will definitely explore because this is the founding class that we're going to have. We would
Sure.
definitely, that is in line actually, we would love to explore that as well, but we will come out. We're nurturing, working on
So
that.
someone is asking me about where do you think a public policy degree along with a reputed management degree take me? A very good combination. Actually, I'm a chartered accountant looking in getting into public administration. Yeah, a very good combination actually, because a management degree combined with a public policy degree would actually make you a very, very strong fit for multinational corporations like the ones that I mentioned already, like Apple or Facebook. So you have advantages of both worlds, because you understand you understand balance sheets, you understand how a department can make profits, and you understand the profit motive, as well as you also are sensitized to public issues, and you're not just profit oriented. So that gives you a good balance, which is very essential. And chartered accountancy, yes, of course. If you're a chartered accountant and you do a public policy, it's also a very good mix, because you have the financial bent of mind. And finance is extremely important in public policy, because public finance is integral to policy formulation. Because at the end of the day, you're given a budget, a program budget, and you have to then formulate a policy which actually enables optimum utilization of that budget. So, as a chartered accountant, you will be extremely extremely fit for this kind of a course and this career. Nature of jobs, the public policy profession, experience in MNCs, I think I've already answered that. uh, yeah, CA and MBA is a good combination. Okay, somebody with public relations with 10 years of experience wants to get into public policy. Yes, I think it'll be a good fit as well, because public policy is not just about technical domains. I happen to be a technical person by core profession, so I got into this kind of realm. But public relations and public policy will make you a very good fit in all these agencies which are looking for heading government affairs, liaising with governments, or also media and communications is a very integral part of public policy. Again, it comes as a part of the networking aspect of public policy. So, because every program today of the government of India requires huge media campaigning. So, if you're a media person, if you're a public relation person, you're very well fit to come out with very good workable media campaigns and strategies. And if the Indian school is doing a course in public policy, I would strongly recommend a person to, even if it's a visiting faculty, somebody who's trained in media, to come and give the students insight into how to make programs more market savvy, and how to make public issues more accessible, or make citizens more aware about public issues. So media is a very integral part of public policy. Masters in Public Policy and Administration. Yes, there is a difference, because, I mean, at least in the courses that are offered abroad, and in the course that I studied in Singapore, there was a clear difference in public policy and public administration. Public policy was for very young graduates who really want to get their techniques right. They want to understand how to actually research and how to formulate policies from scratch. So those were the MPP, the Masters in Public Policy. A public administration, which somebody like me did after around 10 to 12 years of experience at that point of time. That was for fairly mid-career people who've already done a lot of work, and in the in their career, they've already gone some distance in their career, and then they want to actually get an exposure into a wider domain. So that's when public administration. So public administration, even the course content is slightly different, wherein it's more case study oriented and it's more about sharing of best practices, and you actually learn from your cohort more than you actually learn from your classrooms and from your professors. But of course, it's a combination of both. When you need to hone your technical skills, your maybe your understanding of economics, because me being an urban planner, I did not have much knowledge about economics. So this was an eye opener when I learned macroeconomics, I learned microeconomics techniques and policies, and key principles of micro and macroeconomics. So that was an eye opener in terms of techniques. But as a public administration student, I learned a lot from my cohort. Okay, they want the webinar to be shared by email. I think Ram, you can take it later. No?
Yeah. We'll respond to that. We'll definitely share the recording.
So someone's asking whether NPP is a generalist degree and would it be difficult to get a job without a prior specialization like economics or communication? Yeah, an NPP, like any other master's degree, it's actually validating your, or rather giving you an added feather in your cap, and giving you an additional lens and in a wider lens with which you view issues and issues and problems in the public domain. So an NPP, of course, has to follow a graduation. So of course, a core domain like economics or communication helps, but it could also be in any other graduation as well. So someone's asking. Okay, someone's pursued a post graduation in gender and currently pursuing a fellowship in education. Public policy is an intersection of both. Yes, absolutely. It's a very good combination, actually, gender and education, because these are some of the big issues that not only India but across the globe they are grappling with these issues of gender and education. So if you do a public policy degree and you actually go on to making policies in both these domains, it will be a big value addition to the society at large. So more jobs than graduates. What's the trend in the future? Or what does it mean in terms of action? Do you think that there are more jobs than graduates at this point of time? And I don't know what this means, but of course, if you do a master's, of course, you have many more opportunities than a mere graduate. Online degree? No, I'm sorry, there is no online degree in public policy. It's not something that you can do at home. You need to actually go out there, visit, and understand best practices, etc. Think tanks, I've already mentioned. Someone's asking the names of think tanks, like I've said, CPR, Brookings Institution, then various other think tanks are there in the policy space in India as well as outside India. So if you Google them, you'll always get those options. What about the work of a consultant in a research organization, which is a non-partisan institution? Absolutely. I mean, I happen to work with ministries in the government of India, which, of course, there is a political will to the programs that are being deployed. Uh, but you need not necessarily be aligned to any political strategy or any political intent. You can work independently in a think tank or a research institution, which is again a very good space to be in, because you are agnostic of the political party or whichever political strategy is being doled out, and you can also look at programs and policies with an objective lens and with a critical eye also, and also come out with criticisms or critiques of the existing policies, so that it's an eye opener for the policymakers also, because when you're doing a policy sitting in the government, you actually have you're actually focused so much on the policy making that you don't really know where you're going wrong. So people like you, if you're working in a non-partisan institution, you can always give the third eye to the policymaker. An advocate does not have time to do a full-time course. So again, we can hope that there are some part-time courses that are open. We did have that in our institute in LKY, but I think that you have to evolve to that stage to actually start part-time courses. But it may be a good idea to think of it, because you'll have many more students coming in for part-time courses as well.
Yeah, definitely. So looks like.
Yeah. Someone's asking how caste plays a role to formulate public caste. Yeah, caste is a very integral part of our social and political, I mean, socio-economic milieu of India. So, caste is a very important criteria, and whenever we formulate policies, we always make sure to allocate or to give affirmative action for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe, and also women. So that's a given for any policy formulation or program formulation exercise. So is it true that a work experience before doing a master's is more beneficial? I've answered this already. What are the skills needed in this domain? Writing skills. Yes, writing skills is very important. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be very articulate in speaking as well as writing. It's a very big plus for a public policy professional. Would a shift from BA honors in economics to masters in public policy with the aim of becoming a civil servant show any instability on a CV? Not at all. Actually, economics and public policy is a good combination. So, if you're aiming to become a civil servant, it really helps. But even if you don't, you could still have a very good career in with this combination of economics and public policy, especially in institutions like World Bank and other international funding institutions. Lawyer also, yes, lawyer and public policy is a very good combination because law and public there are courses that are offered internationally in law and public policy, short-term courses as well as I think long-term courses. So because regulations, law is an integral part of all policies. So it's a very good combination again. Just like economics, a person with a law background will do very well in this domain. Yeah, I someone's asking whether I did an MPP. I did not do an MPP. I did my master's in urban planning, and I'm basically an engineer. And then I worked for 10 long years, 10, 12 years in public funding institutions like HUDCO and the urban advisory firms before pursuing my master's in public administration. What are the opportunities outside India with this course, or is it India specific, global, or Asia? No, it depends on the Indian School of Public Policy, how much of networking you do with global players, which is very essential. So today, India is the the rising market, and Southeast Asia is the rising tiger. So people from US and Europe, etc., had come to Singapore to study. So there will be a day when people come to India to study. So why can't Indian School of Public Policy be an international school? So
Yeah,
it's for India,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry, just to add to that, yes, I mean we are definitely exploring collaboration opportunities with international universities, and we have as a part of the faculty body, we have international policy experts who are on board as faculty who will be teaching this course, and definitely, so it's evolving day by day, and we are certainly working towards getting more collaborations internationally. You could expect that.
Sure. So, and there's one last question maybe I would like to take. What kind of entry jobs post course with World Bank? Yeah, entry jobs, entry level World Bank and UN. World Bank, of course, opens for young professionals. So, if you are an MPP and applying for a young professional post, it will always have an added advantage. That's it. I think the questions are over.
Have actually one more question if you would like to take that. Are there any courses on animal welfare policies?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, okay,
Courses on
okay.
welfare. No, see, suppose you are a person with a veterinarian discipline and you want to do public policy. It's welcome, and but then you'll have to be ready to go beyond your scope of animal welfare alone. Because if you just want to do animal welfare policies, then you'll be stuck to one department, animal husbandry, or in the state government or in the union government. So you will have to look at your own subject as well as you will have to be ready to move beyond your subject. There's also an opportunity for you to move beyond your subject. Is that fine?
Yeah, yeah. So I think we are done with the questions. So Thank you so much, Ms. Vinita, for joining this. And then it was very engaging, and especially the scope, the points that you covered, in this, about the scope in public policy. And also, you have answered questions very elaboratively. That shows you have kind of, through your out of your experience, you have given inputs. And I'm sure the participants, the number of participants we have, uh, they will definitely find this as a very insightful, session. Thank you so much for your time once again, and to all the participants. And sorry if we would like to apologize if no question, any question that went unanswered because due to paucity of the time. But we will definitely get back with the responses post this session, and the recording will also be shared with everyone. So hope you all have enjoyed. Once again, on behalf of Indian School of Public Policy, and we would like to thank Ms. Vinita Hariharan and also to all the participants. So before we leave, just wanted to inform that we are done with 2 rounds of applications now, and round 3 applications are open right now. We are already seeing some traction to it. People are applying. Those who have attended today and registered but could not attend, you can actually please log into the application, explore the application and also the school. Do apply. We look forward to your applications. If any questions you have, please drop in your queries to contact@ispp.org.in. We shall respond on that. Yeah. And our website address is www.ispp.org.in. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Ram, and thank you, everybody. I hope you all will take this good decision of joining Indian School of Public Policy and pursue this course in Masters in Public, because we need many more of you to help us out with policy making. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Pleasure. Thank you.